Hello guys. So today we have Aditi Sinha, who is the founder of Locale.ai. So welcome Aditi. It's a pleasure meeting you and having you on the podcast.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Okay, so I have actually a lot of questions for you, but I would like to start from knowing your journey at BITS. So please tell us which city do you come from? When did you first hear about BITS Pilani? Were you always very passionate to get into an engineering college? How did it all go and what was the journey there?
Sure. So I basically come from the city of Patna. That's where I did my schooling from. And I think growing up, like JE was like the primal career choice that we would choose for, right? So much so that a lot of people around us would start prepping for this exam, right from their school days, right? So we had people like that in our school. But like it was a given that if you are a smart kid, if you're an ambitious kid, you would probably take that path. And one interesting thing that happened with me was, when I was growing up, one of our family friends went to IIT Kharagpur, and my parents did like this great thing for me, where they took me to IIT Kharagpur's campus, and they showed me the life over there. And I think that is when it was the light bulb moment for me. Something clicked inside me, and I was like, hey, this is the kind of place I really see myself in. This is the kind of people I want to surround myself with, right? Because obviously when you go there, there's like the cream of the entire country, right? So
which standard you were in?
I think I was in 7th grade. So that was really like an eye-opener moment for me. And from that moment coming back, I think I also sort of started working towards that. But not so much up to 10th grade. I think when I went into 11th grade is when I started preparing for JEE. JEE was my ultimate dream, but I did not get a really good rank in the main exam. So BITS was the second best option. I actually did not write any other exam apart from these two because I was like, if I want to go to a college, I would rather go to the best college that is out there. So yeah, I think thankfully BITS worked out for me, and that's when I chose it.
So you joined BITS in 2014?
2014, yes.
With MSc Body?
Yes. So how I chose eco was also a really interesting story. So I actually had no idea about what eco was, but during my prep, when you go through that struggle of preparing for JEE in that coaching institute, so somehow like that joy that I used to feel when I used to read physics, maths, this sort of died, for some reason. And I was like, hey, I want to take a break from these subjects. And when I was looking at what are the options I have in BITS, eco was something that stood out to me. So I went really deep into it. I did a lot of research. What are the things that we study in eco? Because no one in my family had an eco background. I didn't have anyone to talk to about this. So I did a lot of research. I remember there were Facebook groups back then. I don't remember the name of those groups, but I think one was BITSians for each other, but there were other groups that had like admission related queries that seniors would answer for you. So I would ask a lot of questions in that group, hey, what is eco like over there? Why should you do eco in BITS, let's say apart from one humanities university and so on and so forth. And I think after a lot of research, I thought, let's take eco. I'll get 1 year to then figure out which engineering branch do I choose, and maybe then I'll figure out, right? Because I didn't want to jump into something that I knew I would not like doing in the first place. Yeah.
That's very interesting. So did you also face any backlash from your parents' side because you're not directly doing engineering but economics?
No, because I told them, like I did my research, I presented my research to them. I told them that, hey, this is how this course is going to be structured. It'll be probably a 5-year course, eco along with an engineering degree. And right now I don't want to commit to a degree because I don't know what is something I really like. So let me take the first year and explore all of these branches out, and then I'll choose. So that's how I convinced them, and we were okay with that.
That's very very mature way, I would say, was thinking, especially at that age, because mostly as per my limited exposure and as much I have spoken to people and students, most of the people go by ki, let's say computer sciences has the best placement, so let's take that.
Yeah.
या फिर at that score, even people who take economics, उनका reason mainly exploration से ज़्यादा होता है कि maybe यहाँ पे advantageous situation में रहेंगे.
Right.
So I must say that's really impressive that at that age you were thinking so clearly and so much.
I think one thing I realized about myself is that preparation was really honestly a very depressing time. And I was, very isolated, and we would have to study for so many hours. I don't know if you went through the same experience, but I think in that experience, it really teaches you a lot of things about yourself. And one of the things I realized about myself is that, hey, I am the kind of person who really likes to go deep into something that I'm very passionate about. And if there is something that I do that I'm not passionate about, it's going to be really, really difficult for me to do that. So that is, I think, a learning I got about myself at a very young age because of that experience. And I think that's where I chose and took all of the decisions that I've taken from there on.
I can heavily relate it.
Yeah.
So I come from Kota, Rajasthan.
Yeah, so you would know, right? Like that experience is so grueling, and it teaches you a lot about yourself.
Okay, so coming now to what the 4 years at BITS look like. So I would love to know what did you do exactly in those 4 years? How did you, as you mentioned, you wanted to explore at which field would be the best for you. So how did you explore? What was your, for the lack of a better word, process of exploration?
Yeah. I think I was really fortunate looking back because, in my first year, I met some seniors from my college who really guided me. And they were really passionate about economics as well. So what happened was, when I started with my first year, at that moment, I did not really, know which direction to go to or which course to take, like I mentioned in my previous answer. So I was like, hey, let's just try all of these out. But fortunately or unfortunately, nothing really seemed to attract me. And then I was in this dilemma, right? Like, hey, even if I take something, what is really the point of it? Because I know I'm not gonna really study or go deep into it and become an expert. Or what's the point of really studying something that you don't really like, right? So, like I said, I met some seniors and they really guided me. One of the advice that they gave me was that, just take eco. Don't take an engineering degree. And I told them, these are the things. And I've also been researching about eco side by side. And I told them these are all the things I want to really delve deeper into. And they told me, take eco. It will be like the best decision because eco is really, really light. I remember I had some 33 hours per week. Which I remember it to be being really, really lesser as compared to all the other friends I had back then. And so I had a lot of free time, and that really helped me sort of explore a lot of different things. So I remember, for example, I did not really plan it out that way. But looking back now, I think of all those years to have like a different theme. So in my second year, I went really deep into research, and I worked with one of our teaching assistants, and worked with him together to publish a paper, and we did like 2 or 3 papers like that, right? And I was like, yeah, this is fine, but it's too academic for me. I want something more hands-on. And in my third year, I was like, okay, let's explore public policy. So I did a lot of internships and took up internships, I remember, during my course. So there's this organization called JPAL. And I was working with them along with my coursework because, as I said, it was really light, so you had a lot of free time on your hands.
Right.
And throughout all of this, as I was doing is I was trying to figure out what are the things I like, what are the things I'm good at, not good at. And that's where I came to the conclusion that I want to really work in the development space, but I want to work in an organization that's using technology to solve some interesting problems. And that's how I came across Social Corps in my 4th year. They were doing some really interesting work with data and working with governments and organizations to help them with a lot of projects. So that really, really fascinated me and applied there. I did my thesis over there actually. So what I did was
Social.
Social Corps, yes. So I actually did my I took like 6 month internship over there, and in my college I told them that this is where I'm doing my thesis in. And yeah, and it all worked out really well, and I converted to a full-time member over there, and that's how I started to can. So yeah, it's been an interesting journey.
Really interesting. So, Aditi, one of the challenges that students currently face, especially after the social media has become so prominent, is that everyone right now is trying to identify their passion, and then they are trying to convert their passion into profession.
Yeah.
But like the first step only is very, for the lack of a better word, seemingly unachievable. Because इतने सारे interest हैं,
Yeah.
it's very difficult to pinpoint कि ये मेरा passion है, वो मेरा passion है, क्या ये convert हो भी पाएगा कि
Yeah.
नहीं? So what would you suggest? Should one really be looking for passion, या फिर how should one approach career in general?
Honestly, that's a question or a philosophy that I also struggle with a lot of times. So it's not that just because like I have locale, this is for me sorted, right? It's definitely not that.
Yeah.
But I think it really, it's a very individual and a personal choice, right? It depends on a lot of things. For example, what is your financial background like at home, right? Do you have responsibilities? If yes, then what happens a lot of times in the creative field, you might have some time before your passion or your creative instinct really takes off, and that starts paying your bills, right? So
Right.
you have a time lag for that. But if let's say you have a lot of responsibilities back home, maybe that might not be your first choice. So it really depends. I think if you're well sorted and you're figuring out, hey, do I do something more unconventional, or do I maybe take a job, I think maybe the right way to think about would be, even if you don't have, let's say, one passion that this is something you have to choose and something you're very, very good at, I like to follow this advice from someone I really admire. She's an author. Her name is Elizabeth Gilbert. And what she says is that, you should, if you don't have one passion, you should follow your curiosity, right? So let's say if amongst all the things that you are right now passionate about, what is something that you're most curious about? Because if you're curious about something, you would want to go deeper into it. You would want to put in the effort. You would want to put in the grunt work in the hours, which will then help you become better at that, right? So maybe that is one thing I can advise juniors to probably take care and think about.
That's a really insightful point.
Yeah.
Because if I look in hindsight, so what fortunately worked in my case as well was I was just trying to explore my curiosities.
Yeah.
Whether be it through my YouTube channel or exploring different
Yeah.
internships. So yeah, that's a really nice and also applicable insight that to say. What was the name of the author you mentioned?
Elizabeth Gilbert.
Elizabeth Gilbert. Okay. Yeah. So then you completed your economics honors in 2018,
Yes.
and you didn't take the engineering
Yes.
along with that.
Yes.
So any particular reasoning behind that? Also, more than the reasoning, I wanted to understand from you how were you able to get so much of clarity that मुझे ये, because as you mentioned कि 7th class में when you were there, you visited IIT Kharagpur and you saw that whole engineering वाला environment, and वहीं से शायद वो seed plant हो गया था कि engineering करनी है.
शायद.
And then after coming to BITS Pilani, you didn't do engineering at all.
Yes.
So वो clarity कैसे आती है, your case को कैसे आई, and क्या उस time पे confidence था कि even when I'm not doing engineering, I will figure things out. या फिर how was the mindset back then?
I don't think the seed of being an engineer got planted. The seed of leading that life got planted, where you're surrounded with the best people in the country. You have access to such amazing facilities, right? And you will get a chance to probably, like do projects or join clubs with, again, like really smart people. I think that is what really, really attracted me. Not so much the prospect of being an engineer itself. But answering your second question on how did I get clarity, I think yeah, it was just, honestly, I followed my intuition. I think at that moment I was not feeling attracted towards any engineering degree, and when I would imagine myself even sitting and writing code, I was not seeing myself as someone who's happy doing that. the other branches, same story with that. Right? So I thought even if, let's say, I want to explore maybe some subjects, I can take them as electives, right? So I sat and did a lot of thinking. I spoke to a lot of seniors. A lot of people told me, hey, your placements prospects would get limited if you don't opt for engineering. I am not sure about that, maybe, but I think I never sat for placements in the first place again, so I will not comment on that. But again, I was really sure that I will not, I will not sit for regular placements because I don't see myself working in a very corporate environment, right? So these are small, how do I say, like nuggets I had about myself. At hey, I don't see myself doing this, I don't see myself doing that. Actually, I knew what I didn't want to do rather than what I wanted to do. So I tried to eliminate all of that.
Very
Right? And then just maybe went to what are the things that again sound interesting, I'm curious about. Tried, experimenting with those. Whatever felt good, whatever I liked doing, I just went deeper and then landed into social cops, which I really loved as a job. Right? So I think, just talk to people, and you will find a lot of people who will say, don't do this. Just take. A lot of people used to tell me, hey, take a dual. Kya hi hoga? Like you just have to do a degree. I was like, no, like that's so many hours of time wasted into something I don't want to do. Imagine if I had that time that I would spend in doing something that I was really maybe passionate about or I really wanted to try out. That would be so much fun for me. But different people are also different. Like for example, some people don't have that trust in themselves that if they have time, they would maybe utilize it in a productive way or not. So again, it's a very personal decision. I never had those doubts about myself.
Got it. I think self-awareness definitely played a very big role.
Exactly. I think it's self-awareness is something that I think a lot of people, a lot of my friends say is one of my biggest strengths.
And even I can vouch for that because we haven't gone a lot ahead in the discussion in the podcast, but still a lot of decisions that you took and that you spoke about, I think the clarity and confidence definitely requires self-awareness to be a foundational part.
Definitely.
Okay, so moving on to the next phase of your life. So you graduated from BITS in 2018, then you joined Social Cops. And I think after 6 or 7 months of your graduation, you started looking.
Yes.
So firstly, I would like you to tell the audience, maybe in a one line, what is Locale, what is the problem it is solving, and how did you get the idea? How did you identify the problem in the first?
Sure. So the problem that we started with is now very different from the problem that we're solving, which again I'll talk about in my journey because as a founder, there's a lot of iteration that you will have to go when you first start with an idea, right? Because what you start with is just a hypothesis, but as in when you work with the market, you work with the users, they will tell you what is actually the right thing to pursue. So the idea started because when I joined Social Cops, that's when I met my now co-founder Rishabh, and we were working on a lot of projects together, and that's when we saw that a lot of tools that operations teams were actually using were very bespoke. They were built internally and they were not in a very I would say the top-notch software that other teams were inside the company were using, right? So if you take any other company, sales, marketing, HR, engineering, data, design, all of these have amazing tools that are developed and customized for their needs and their workflows. And we saw that operations teams were still using Excel sheets and some BI dashboards, and they were using a combination and a bunch of different tools, right? That were very scattered. And because of that, the workflow was getting hampered and a lot of delays in the business operations processes and so on. So that's what we started with. Hey, can we build a product for operations teams to help them do their job better, right? At that moment we were working with a lot of location based on geospatial data. So the idea was, how do we use this technology and build that software for them? But again, as I said, it's gone through a lot of iterations. We actually pivoted in the middle, and now what we basically do, we call ourselves an operations command center or a control tower. Anytime something goes wrong in their business, we basically detect that from their data, and we notify the right person in their team so that they can solve it before it reaches their customer. So there's this concept called observability, which a lot of developers and dev teams use. So the concept was, how do we utilize the same principles and then apply it in the world of business?
Got it. Very interesting. So when you started, you mentioned that you wanted to build something for the operations team,
Yes.
because there was no such tool which like product team or sales team were using. So why do you think there was no such tool previously? Like, was the problem, I don't know, like, was it very difficult to solve, was the problem, or like was the solution not very affordable and you figured something out on that?
I honestly did not know this when we were starting out as to why is there no specialized tool for operations team. But I think now, if I look back in the journey, I could tell you that there are a whole bunch of reasons. I think one is that, when you think of, let's say, customer support or customer success today, there is a market leader, there is a Zendesk or a Freshdesk that most people opt for, right? When there is, let's say, sales, people use Salesforce or HubSpot. When there's design, people use Figma, right? For engineering, people use GitHub, and then Linear or Jira to manage their tickets, right? So for all of these, there are these, market leaders and these tools that have stood out. And when you have to adopt a tool in your company, that's where your mind goes in the first place, right? Hey, let me dig a tool like that and build it for my team. I think with operations, there hasn't been a category leader in that space. And that's because, a lot of the tools that have been built today are built, very industry specific, vertical specific. That was the first thing. And the second thing is also that, with the rise of a lot of data lake and data warehouses, now a lot of data is being collated into one place by all companies, right? So because of that, it's enabling companies like us to sort of emerge where we can utilize their entire business data and then give them, whatever automation, alerts or notifications or insights, whatever it is that you want, right? So that concept of data lake or data warehouse did not exist before. So I think these would be the two reasons. One is that no one really attempted to build like a horizontal sort of an operations layer. And secondly, and that could also be because the data was not sort of collated in one place. And now with the rise of data lakes, it enables companies like us to get formed.
Got it. Very interesting. I'm curious to know the exact details of that day when you and Rishabh had the discussion that let's start something of our own. Please tell me about it.
Yeah, what's really crazy is that, and I tell this to everyone, like we have this joke in the company that Look actually started just as a fun experiment that we both will do, so we had been talking about this problem, and Rishabh actually fortunately had 3 more years of experience than me, so he did not go to college unlike me, and he started working at Social Corps from his second year onwards. So he had a lot more insights into the industry, right? But when you're working together, he would tell me about all of these insights and what is the gap really, and that would really fascinate me as well, right? But what happened was, he was actually looking out, and when he went for a job, a lot of companies, told him that, what you built there, can you come and build it for us? And I was like, instead of going and building it for different companies, why don't you build it as a product and send it to them, right? And that's how it all started. But we were like, I was almost right after college, right? I never thought I'll actually do this seriously, but we both decided, we're like, hey, let's just give ourselves 6 months and see if there's something we can do. And worst case, we'll just go out there and get a job. And that moment, honestly, I was not really, I didn't even think like it would work. I was just thinking, hey, let me give myself this 6 months and I'll just, get my hands dirty, maybe learn a thing or two. And, after that, probably we'll go and get jobs, because most likely this will not work out. We barely know anything about running a business and all of that. And those 6 months are still continuing. Yeah.
But like at that time, why did you feel that it might not work?
Because we wanted to make it work, but I just thought that we don't have the skills to do it, right? I had that much faith in myself that I'll figure it on the job. and as and when things get thrown at me, and probably try to sort of work them out. But it just seemed too good to be true, that I was like, I have no professional experience. I don't even know how to manage a team, right? That's the most basic skill that you need. So I barely had any skills. I did not have a lot of experience, and all I had was just just scattering around and trying to get my hands dirty into doing different things, and that's all I had on my resume. So that is what, right? Like I believe Rishabh had like really good skill set when it came to the tech and the product and what we want to build. But given I was a business person, I did not have that full faith that hey, I'd actually be able to do it. But yeah, somehow things sort of burned out when we started.
So because of this, because you had this apprehension, was putting down paper side social props a difficulty or something you deliberately think for a long time?
I actually thought no, because I was like, hey, this is such a good opportunity. Like I saw that, hey, I have really nothing to lose. I was like, again, the only question that was going on was, let's think of the worst case scenario, like what will happen.
Yeah.
One was I had very little savings, so that is something I had to figure out, and I kind of borrowed some money from my parents. I thankfully returned them that money after that, but I think that was a big point for me because I did not have a lot of savings. And second was I could not think of like a very that's what, right? Like this thing, when you start a company, what is the worst case scenario, right? That you will fail. But I just felt like, hey, even if I fail, I'm anyways thinking that I'm going to go and get a job. So if I go and apply for the next job, I'll have more skills than I currently do, right? So I'm going to be paid more. So it's a win-win for me. I honestly thought of it as a win-win for myself. So I did not think, putting down papers was not very hard.
Wow. That was really insightful because it kind of, as per what I am able to understand from the stories, you had a completely different perspective to look at it. While as an interviewer or as a usual person, somebody might have looked at it in the frame of what would happen if it didn't work. We were looking at it as an opportunity, as a win-win situation.
Yes. I was like, hey, I have this really smart person who's willing to work with me. And, we had established a camaraderie between ourselves of working together because we were working on projects together.
Yeah.
And, he wants me to join him in this journey. And I was like, hey, what do I have to lose? There is really nothing, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so Aditi, you mentioned that Locale, when it started, now it is very different because you pivoted in between. So obviously, I would like you to tell us that now product kya hai, although you have told us in brief. But I have a more fundamental question about decision making. So, and I would like to put it to you in the form of an example. So, for example, there are two farmers, and दोनों के अपने farms हैं, दोनों ने अपने seed बोए, ठीक है? एक farmer है, he is doing all the things right. उसका manure सही है, उसका irrigation सही है, he is taking proper care of the seeds. The second farmer is not doing anything right. But after, let's say 3-4 months, none of the farmers are able to see any growth because first वाला person सब सही कर रहा है, but the growth of a plant requires patience. वो पहले root से grow करता है, उसके बाद आपको ground के ऊपर देता है. So I wanted to understand from you कि when things are not working well or they are not going in the direction you want to take, how can one figure out कि is it because of we are doing something wrong or is it because we have not given it ample time and we should be perhaps more patient to let the results show up?
Yeah, honestly, this really depends on, again, it's a very personal topic because no one can answer this question apart from the farmers. And when you sit back and reflect on this question, you have to be really, really true to yourself. Like, I think when you think about it, you will know in your heart or in your intuition whether you have done your best or given it your all or not, right? And honestly, it's not just about that. It's about a lot of different things. Like, it's so complex. For example, one could be that, hey, maybe my team is not as strong as I thought and our execution is not at power, right? The other could be that, hey, we have not given this specific GTM motion enough time. The other could be that, hey, the insight with which we started the company, that's not true anymore, right? So it can be so many reasons like that, and there is no like one fit rule that works for all situations. It's very company specific, it's very situation specific, and you have to sit and give this a lot of time to think about what have you done so far, what has worked, what has not worked, what is something that you should maybe try on for some more time. And only once you feel you've given it your all, everything, and it's not still working, then maybe think about, hey, what is the reason it's not working? Is it that the product is not good? Is it that as I said, the hypothesis is not true, the unique insight that we had about the market, that's not true, or did we get the problem wrong? Like, it can be so many things, and then maybe you can sort of take your next steps from that. So in that case, with the two farmers that you asked the question for, I cannot say, because it's not that straightforward an answer. It depends on a lot of things, right? Whether the farmers have actually studied their users and understood what their users want or not.
Got it. But could you tell us like what? So I'm a big believer that the more and the varied questions we ask ourselves, and it's a part of self-awareness, as we discussed a few minutes back. The more questions we ask, it's better than having more answers in a way.
Yeah.
So what kind of questions can one ask in general as well, and in particular in this case, to reach to this clarity that if we are doing something wrong or market has changed or what has happened?
I think you can divide this into three parts: product, market, and GTM. GTM becomes more important if you're a B2B company more than B2C. GTM or acquisition channel, right? So in product, just think about what is the problem, who is it for, have we built the right solution, do we have an edge over our competitors? So these are the things you have to think about in your products, right? In your market, for example, you can think about, have you picked the right market? Is this market big? That's really, really important, especially if you want to build a venture-backed business. Is this market growing? So these are some questions you can mull over when it comes to the market. And with the GTM or acquisition channel, you can think about, have we maybe exhausted all channels? How much is the cost of acquisition for different channels? Versus there's this term called CAC by LTV, right? Like lifetime value. So with the return that a user is getting it, simple, right? Like there's a cost that you use to acquire a user versus the return it gives you when they buy a product. So is this economically viable or not, right? Have you exhausted all, or are there any other channels you can use, right? Maybe, for example, for B2B, you have a lot of these standardized GTM that you can go for, right? B2C, there's a little bit more creativity you can play with, right? But most, again, it's kind of standardized. People use content, people use ads, people do all sorts of things, right? So yeah, I think these are some things you can think about when you're figuring out, hey, how is my company doing? And assess whether what you've built so far is the right thing for yourself or not.
Got it, makes sense. What's the most difficult part of being a founder?
It's really difficult. What's the most difficult part? I think I can tell you what has been the most difficult part for me. I think I'm not sure whether it looks glamorous from the outside. A lot of people assume that. But honestly, it's a really, really tough job. And it's a job where you have to assume that you're going to encounter failures almost every other day, failure or rejection in some or the other way, right? I think for me, because I get so, into whatever I'm doing and I get so attached, I think I had to really learn the skill of not getting affected by those failures or rejections on a day-to-day basis and not let it get to me every single time. I think that was the toughest thing for me. But I think different people struggle with different problems, right? But I think emotional management, as you're going through it's like crazy ups and crazy downs, right? Like any founder would describe their journey like that. So as you're going through such crazy sine waves, you have to figure out how do you keep yourself sane through that. I would say that for me is the toughest. It has been the toughest.
So how did you then develop this thick skin over time?
I don't think I have even today completely, if I'm being very honest with you. But I think one is that there is honestly no choice. Like if you have to do this and you have to go tomorrow and show your face to the team, and you have to again go with that renewed energy, because see, when you go like that in front of the team, the entire team's morale will go down. So there's really no option. So I think you're forced to figure out a way. And secondly, I think different things work for different people. I think over time, for example, different people, like for example, my co-founder, he's really into fitness, and he, goes and sweats it out in gym, right? I think for me, I sometimes used to go for dance classes a lot of times. I would maybe just sit and journal, hey, what am I feeling, why am I feeling, and figure out how to then get over it, right? So I think over time, you develop these strategies that work for you. And I think even in my journey, I felt like different things have worked at different points of time. Sometimes, like initially, when I did not know how to deal with any of this, I would probably ring my friends or my mentors or advisors saying, hey, how do I deal with this situation, right? Over time, as I learned, I sort of became more self-sufficient. So I think that different things work at different points.
Okay. And I'm sure the problems definitely must have changed what they were when you started and what they are right now.
Yeah.
But I wanted to understand, like from a more fundamental perspective, has the nature of problems also changed? So for example, if previously a problem might be very superficial, but then you realize that maybe we need to solve it from a deeper level.
Yes. I'm not sure about superficial, but yes, the nature of problems have changed, I guess. And I think it will keep changing, right, as the company grows. Initially, we did not know how to hire the right person, right? So we made so many hiring mistakes. But today, I think, anyone you talk to in our team, I would say we have one of the best teams in the country, right? Like, I'm really, really proud of the team that we built. And it's taken so many trials and errors and hits and misses to get here. So they were not superficial, but it took us time to learn and hone these skill sets. Like, I had never done sales in my life, so it took me some time and a lot of errors till the time where I could probably sort of close an entire deal on my own, right? So I think the nature of problems do change. Yes, initially when you don't have funds, you're always constantly worried about, hey, how are we going to make payroll, right, the next month. Now it's like, hey, how do we grow faster, right? Where can we invest more? Where should we not invest more? Where do we focus? So yeah, that's how it is.
So my next very obvious question to you, or maybe not so obvious, how should one hire for a team?
How should one hire? I've written a framework actually and recently posted about this. I think I would divide it into two parts. One is on the skill sets that you need, and the other is how do you fit within the company culturally, right? So skill sets is much easier to judge, right? And one of the things that we were advised on is that you should not hire in the early days. You should not hire someone if you've not done the work yourself, right? So once you've done the work yourself, you know what are the things that are needed. You can assess whether the person actually has done that or not, or is just bullshitting his way through, right? I think skill sets is much easier to judge. The other part I think is more tricky, but if you get that right, I think you will get people who really, really want to come to work and make your company successful. And I think how we have sort of figured that out is, we figured out what are the things that are important for us, right? Like we wanted people who are hardworking. We wanted people who are diligent. And I know these are things everyone says, but which is why you have to really, filter out the people who are just saying that for the sake of it. So for example, have they demonstrated in their past whether they worked hard or have they gone out of their way to achieve something or get something done or not, right? Whether they have, let's say, for example, one of the questions we ask is, what is something that you've done in your career that you're really proud of and why? So that shows what is the hustle that the person has really put and what lengths is he willing to go, right? Whether he's self-motivated or not. Because again, a startup is so hard. There's so many battles and failures that you have to, encounter all the time. You really, really need the person to be self-motivated, right? Because you can't have a team that you have to motivate every single day, right? So I think these are the things that we look for when we're hiring, and we've sort of developed a lot of specific questions that we ask people when we meet them, and we really go deep into their story, like how you are doing that with me. I think I probably go like even 10 times deeper, right, to figure out what have they really done and figured out in their lives.
Also, one of the challenges that I have heard a lot of founders as well as some other people who manages teams speaking about is delegation of work. Because when I am doing something, I will make sure that I am giving my 100%. But when I am delegating work, it's kind of I am putting my trust on that other person.
Yeah.
So was delegation ever a problem for you? If not, like what was your mindset when you kind of, so to speak, started managing a team and trusting them to do something?
I think it's not been a big problem for me, but I know people for whom it is a problem. I think there's one way to sort of manage that I've figured out is that don't delegate everything in one go, right? So let's say whenever a person is joining your team, work with them for a while, let them get a taste of how you do that work, right? Like what are the things that you care about, what are the things that matter to you, right? And let them perceive that, let them get a flavor of that, and once they do, they and a lot of this they'll just observe while working very closely with you, right? And slowly sort of start handing off, right? I think this happens when you get someone external and then you give everything on their plate and then you expect them to do exactly how you have been doing things, which is, I think, a bit of an unreasonable ask. So set expectations with them, tell them that by this time frame I want you to be here, and this is set them a path on how you see them getting to that place, right? So I think that would be a good framework to follow when you have to delegate it.
It makes sense. So basically, in a nutshell, like proper communication is very important. The clarity of thought and communication.
It's like, these are the kind of advice I kind of steer away from, because it's the kind of advice that it's needed in every kind of relationship, right? It's not just when you're, let's say, with your girlfriend or when you're dating or with your partner, right? It's exactly the same case when you have a co-founder and when you have a colleague or a subordinate, right? You have to communicate to make sure you're on the same page. But it's a very generic advice, so I would say it's communicating the right things in the right time in the right way is something that is important. And I think also based on the person, like different people sort of understand things in a different way. So as you learn how to manage people, you will figure this out, right? Like what are the things that tick you versus tick her versus tick me, right? And then you will customize or contextualize your ask or your expectations accordingly.
Wow, that was really interesting. White.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are almost at the end of this podcast. So one of the questions that I actually didn't want to ask you, but I think it's something that that needs to be asked. So being a woman founder, so like was it like relatively more difficult at any point? Like do people like in general or investors have any maybe unconscious bias towards female founders, or is there any stuff there?
I never at least found bias when it comes to investors. But there are situations when I felt very out of place, especially when you're in B2B and you're selling to a lot of old people. And you go and you pitch to them and you meet them, and they see you as a very young female founder. They think of you as a kid, right? So I think there have been situations when I felt really out of place. Honestly, there is no solution to that. Like you just have to, like it's like how self-doubt is something that is a very common feeling that all of us have, right? But how do you deal with it? The only way to deal with it is to go and do that thing that is really preventing you from really going out there and doing it, right? So in my case, I think I just, no matter how much out of place I felt, I just went and focused on the work I was doing, which is to sell the product that I was selling. And I think with time and over the years, it's really reduced. So I didn't feel any specific bias from investors. except a couple of examples, but I don't know if that was because I was a female or not. So I don't want to generalize it and say that, hey, it's something that all females probably face.
Okay. So going a little off the tangent, did you in past or do you like right now also get affected with what others think of you? Like it's a very generic question, and in others as well, there's a lot of people. It can be your close friends, it can be family, it can be acquaintance. But like, does that thing affect you that if somebody is thinking maybe in bad faith about you or something?
I think everyone gets affected by what others think of them. I don't think there is anyone who does not. I think it really depends on who is. When we say others, who are we really referring to, right? Is it your friends? Is it your batchmates? Is it your random relatives? Is it your family? Right? I think, in my opinion, the way we think about this is have like that trusted group of friends or people that you have that you really, really respect, whose opinion really matters to you. And I think you should care about what they think. I think it will be important to take their decision or their perspective when you are taking important decisions in life. Because you would assume that they are the people who really know you, right? So even when you're off track or you're doing something that is maybe not true to you, they can also help you get back on track, right? So it works both ways. Yeah, I think that would be how I would think about it. So yes, I do get affected, but hopefully with the right set of people.
So the question is not to whether get affected or not, but from whose statements.
Yes.
Very good. Okay, so one last question for you, Aniti. So firstly, congratulations for making it to Forbes 30 under 30 channels.
Thank you.
The whole Britson community is very proud of you. So I wanted to understand from you, has anything like really changed after you made to the list? So for example, so very honestly, I didn't know that Aditi Sinha exists. I have definitely heard of Local, but I didn't know you that Aditi exists before you came to Forbes 30. So have you started seeing any such, so to speak, tangible differences in the way people approach you, or maybe somebody applies to the company or investors reach out to you? So basically in the communications you have been having since you made to this.
I honestly think it's not been a long time since this happened. I think it's been
A month.
a month. Yeah. In the last 1 month, maybe not as much, but again, like of course, it's a very prestigious title, so it will be very foolish of me to say that there won't be any impact on that. So the impact of this will obviously I'll experience this when, let's say, we are going fundraising, or when we are going right now, for example, one of our focus markets is in the US, right? And when we're approaching clients there, once they sort of see it on our profiles that this is something that we have achieved, it will obviously sort of help us get more get a better foot in the door, right? So I think the time frame is really very small to quantify the impact, but yeah, there have been some very nice initial signs. I think I have been getting a lot of interview requests, so that's definitely something more very significant that has happened. But apart from that, I think from the business side, it will take a while for it to really impact in the way that we can quantify.
And who was the first person you told that you made to this list?
Actually, I didn't even know. So I got to know about it through one of my friends who congratulated me.
Oh, interesting.
So yeah, I think one of my she's actually a Bitsy, so she messaged me and congratulated me early in the morning, and that's how I got to know about it. So I guess that's how it happened.
And how did your parents feel like जब आपने इनके बताया हुआ कि I am in this list?
Yeah,
They are still in Patna?
yes, yeah. Yeah, I think they were really proud. Just like any other parents, they were very happy, very elated. Yeah, they called all my relatives, my entire family, and told.
Wow. No, very nice. Thank you so much, Ananti, for your time. And especially on Saturday, I know you have another event to go to, but thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. This was a lot of fun.